Good day! Today, we're going to learn how to set up our very own SCP secret laboratory server on Ubuntu 22.04. The first half of the video will be more geared towards people who are only interested in setting up their SL server and aren't looking to go into the more intricate details. Afterwards, I will go further into depth about what we're doing and how we're doing it. I will list all the commands executed in the description of the video, along with a download link to PuTTY, the SSH software that I use. If you're unfamiliar with the term SSH, it stands for Secure Shell Protocol. I don't exactly know how that acronym came around, but regardless, this is what you use to control your Ubuntu machine from CLI, which stands for Command Line Interface. Before we begin with the server installation, I'm going to walk you through the installation of PuTTY, but you can use any SSH software that you would prefer. I'm going to download the 64-bit x86, and this is likely what you will need as well. Once the installer has finished downloading, go ahead and open it. We can click through the first prompt, and the next prompt allows you to change the installation directory if needed. For my purposes, I'm just going to leave this as default. On this screen, I would suggest ticking the option to add the shortcut on the desktop. We can go ahead and click install and allow PuTTY admin privileges. Click finish, and you're welcome to pause the video and take a gander at the readme, but we're going to skip over this in this tutorial. In PuTTY, you will see a hostname field. Here, you're going to type root at the IP address of your server. If this is a remote server, likely through a host, they should have provided you with the public IP. If this is a local server, you'll have to find your local IP on Ubuntu by running this command. You can choose to save this session by giving it a name here and then pressing save. Once we fill out all the required info, go ahead and click open. PuTTY will warn you that you're connecting to the server for the first time. Just hit accept. However, if you see this message again and you didn't modify anything, this likely means that your server has been compromised in one way or another. Go ahead and input your super secret password. This should have been provided by your host or created by you. If you're interested in the more detail-oriented bit of this video, this is where you should skip ahead to the next chapter. The first thing we're going to do is update our server. We're going to facilitate this by pasting the first command in the description and pressing enter. Assuming this is a fresh install, this may take a while. If you see a screen similar to this, I usually just go with what it suggests, so press enter. We can just click OK. Now it's asking which services should be restarted. But we're going to restart our whole machine after this to ensure all updates are applied, so we're just going to tab down to OK and press enter. Finally, we're going to reboot our machine by typing reboot. PuTTY will say the other side has closed the connection, and this is expected because the machine is currently restarting. Just give it a few minutes and try connecting again. Now that the server has rebooted, the first thing I'm going to do is configure and enable my firewall. This is an optional step, and that's why it's not included in the main command. It is imperative, however, if you have changed the port for SSH or have any other services running, that you open the correct ports on your firewall. Otherwise, they will stop working. We're going to do this by pasting the second command in the description and pressing enter. We can type Y to enable our firewall. Now, we're going to paste the third command in the description, which will create a new user, install the game and any dependencies. You will have to create a password for this new user. Now it's just asking if you'd like to configure your repositories. Just press enter. Now it's asking if you would like to agree to the steamcmd EULA. Just press enter, and then arrow key down to I agree and press enter. Now it's asking for a password for a new user. This can be any password you'd like. Now we can paste the fourth command in the description, and this will install our server. Now that scpsl is finished installing, we can run the final command to start our server. Now you can type yes to accept the EULA. You can choose to edit these options, but I'm going to type keep for my purposes. I'm going to type this as we only want these settings saved for this server. Great, now your server is up and running. You can connect to your server via direct connect or apply to have your server verified by Northwood to show in the server list. If you'd like to learn more about configuring your server, I suggest skipping to the configuration chapter. The first thing we're going to do is update our server. We're going to facilitate this by first typing apt-update. This is going to see exactly what needs updated. Assuming this is a fresh install, this may take a while. Next, we're going to type apt-upgrade to facilitate actually updating the server. Again, assuming this is a fresh install, this may take a while. If you see a screen similar to this, I usually just go with what it suggests, so press enter. We can just click OK on this one. And now it's asking what services should be restarted. But directly after this, we're just going to restart our whole machine to ensure all the updates are applied, so we're just going to tab down to OK and press enter. Finally, we're going to reboot our machine by typing reboot. PuTTY will say the other side closed the connection, and this is expected because the machine is currently restarting. Just give it a few minutes and try connecting again. Now that the machine has restarted and all the updates have been applied, we're going to proceed to configure our firewall. This step is completely optional, and if you change your default SSH port, or wish to run your SL server on a different port, or have any other services that utilize separate ports, it's imperative that you configure the firewall to your needs. In summary, the way a firewall works is it can either open or close a path to the internet. In my installation, by default, the firewall is disabled. This means that any traffic from any port can access my server. This is bad and opens you up to a bunch of vulnerabilities. We should enable our firewall to attempt to block any connections we don't want. However, if we enable the firewall without opening our desired ports, we will be unable to send our desired internet traffic to the server. If you're hosting this server from home, there's a good chance you'll have to port forward on your router, assuming your ISP or internet service provider allows this. I cannot help you with this, but I've linked a resource in the description called portforward.com, and it is likely they have specific instructions for your router. If you're renting the server from a host, they may also have a firewall you have to configure as well. Once we've configured our firewall, and if applicable, forwarded our ports, you will be able to send the desired traffic. Now that we know what a firewall is and how it works, we will open our ports by running the following commands. Sudo ufw allow 22. This is the default SSH port. Sudo ufw allow 7777. This is the default scpsl port. And then we will enable our firewall by typing sudo ufw enable. A prompt will appear advising this may interrupt current connections. However, if you configured your firewall correctly, it will be fine. Now that we've configured our firewall, we're going to install the dependencies for scpsl and steamcmd. steamcmd is the program we're going to use to install the scpsl server software. First, we're going to install mono. This is used by scpsl for things like the voice chat. We can do this by typing apt install mono-complete. Next, we're going to install and enable the dependencies for steamcmd. The commands are all in the description, but if you choose to type them, you can pause the video now. Now, we're going to type apt-update. Finally, we're going to install steamcmd by typing sudo apt install steamcmd. Now it's asking if you would like to agree to the steamcmd EULA. Just press enter, and then arrow key down to I agree and press enter. Now that steamcmd is installed, we're going to add a new user to install the scpsl server on. We can do this by typing adduser and inserting your name here. I will name this user scpsl, but you can name it whatever you like. We can just press enter until it asks us if this information is correct. Then you can press Y and enter. Now, we can switch to this user by typing su and the name of the user that you created. Next, we're going to tell steamcmd to install and validate the scpsl server software by pasting this command. While steamcmd installs the server, let me explain the importance of having a separate user. If this account is compromised, it is isolated from the rest of your server and is more or less powerless and unable to do a lot of damage. We can take further measures to protect our server, which I may demonstrate in a future video. Now that scpsl is finished installing, we should navigate to the scpsl directory. If you named your user scpsl, you can simply paste this from the video description. Otherwise, you can change scpsl to your username. The quotation marks are important, as without them, it will not recognize the path because of the spaces. Once here, we can start our server by typing /local admin 7777. If you wish to change the port, you can type whichever port you choose in place of 7777. This is opening the executable for scpsl on port 7777, which is the default port. Now you can type yes to accept the EULA. You can choose to edit these options, but I'm going to type keep for my purposes. I'm going to type this, as we only want these settings saved for this server. Great, now your server is up and running, but before we finish, we should touch up on some final settings. Go ahead and type exit in the panel. Now, navigate to the config directory by pasting this. Again, changing scpsl to the user that you created. scpsl organizes the server by port, so if you change the port, you'll have to type that in place of 7777. Now, we can take a look at the gameplay config. Type nano, which is a text editor, config_gameplay.txt. In this file, I would recommend changing the following: the server name, the max players, the friendly fire, and the AFK time. You can find these by pressing Ctrl W and typing in the name. The W stands for where is, if that makes it easier to remember. Once you've configured everything you wish to configure, you can press Ctrl X to exit and then Y to save. Next, let's set up your administrative panel for the game. Type nano config_remoteadmin.txt. Here, I recommend putting your Steam ID 64 in the owner slot and any other IDs that you wish to have access in the respective roles. If you need more slots, you can simply copy and paste the line. If you don't want to assign roles by Steam ID, you can alternatively set up an administrator password, but this is generally not recommended and will give anyone with the password owner equivalent permissions. You can set this by using Ctrl W and searching override_password, and then change none to your desired password. You can press Ctrl X to exit and then Y to save. Congrats, you have just finished setting up your server. In addition to this, you have learned how to configure and enable your firewall. Also, we installed steamcmd on your server, so you can install any Steam games you'd like without having to worry about installing it again. Finally, we should install one last piece of software, and this allows you to run programs in the background. Northwood recommends Tmux in their guide, so this is what we will use. We can install this by running sudo apt-install tmux. But it also may be installed by default on your system. To open a new terminal, just type tmux new-s name. To start your server, go back to the scpsl directory. Now, we can type /localadmin 7777. If you'd like to return to your previous terminal, you can press Ctrl B and then press D. To find your old terminal, type tmux space ls. Then to return to the previous terminal, type tmux space attach space -t space the name. If you just want your friends to be able to connect to your server, they can simply use direct connect and type in your public IP. If you want your server to appear in the server browser, you must get your server verified by Northwood. You can read more information regarding that in the description. In addition to this, you have learned how to enable what the fuck?